Welcome to the 25th edition of the Miami Jewish Film Festival, actually the world's biggest of its kind. I am Andreas Siegal, the Consul General of Germany in Florida, based in Miami. And the German Consulate has been a long-standing partner of the Miami Jewish Film Festival. I've seen it grow by quantity and quality, the film festival, and that's certainly because of the very good membership and the sponsors and all the excellent team that's working for the Miami Jewish Film Festival. And so thank you all you film lovers who are looking and watching us now for your support throughout these years. Now today, I'm very happy to be talking about one of the German films that is being screened during the festival. It's the film Schattenstunde, translation would be Shadow Hour. And the pleasure is even bigger to be able to do this with the scriptwriter, director, and producer of the film, Benjamin Martins. So hello and welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, and Benjamin Martins actually is accompanied by his co-owner of the company, which is actually his dog, Müsli, who's silently watching us as well.
Right.
Welcome to Müsli.
She is really the CEO of the company.
I see. Well, I watched the film yesterday, and I must say it's a very challenging film. It's a very hard topic to digest, I must say. So my first question is maybe how did you get the idea of making this film?
Well, I've heard of Jochen Klepper first in 2009. I was in a church service and the pastor talked about Jochen Klepper. And afterwards, I read his biography and his diaries. He wrote diary for over 10 years. And so this idea kind of developed and I wanted to know more and more about him. And how many years, 12, 13 years later, I'm here with this film.
Yeah, I mean, just to describe briefly the plot, an authentic, Jochen Klepper was an authentic person, a composer, songwriter, poet who lived in Germany, married to a Jewish wife, and that is sort of the core issue of the plot. Actually, we are witnessing sort of the last minutes before his family commits suicide in view of the fact that there's no way out of the trap of the systematic extermination of Jewish people, as we are in 1942, that is December of 1942, when the action takes place. That is also, well, almost 1 year after the Wannsee Conference, which took place in the beginning of 1942, where the systematic extermination of Jews was decided, and the implementation was very meticulously planned, among others by one of the characters or one of the persons who is in the movie, Adolf Eichmann, a very infamous Nazi who finally was tried in Israel in the 1960s, and through him actually many of the details of the Holocaust became common knowledge, which many people hadn't known before. So it's a dramatic situation. We're watching a family committing suicide, and in particular, we're watching their thoughts they're going through in the last hours before that. But the interesting thing is, I mean, there have been many other films about the Holocaust, but your film applies very particular artistic techniques and methodologies coming from expressionism and surrealism even. Can you explain how you got that idea?
Yeah, well, there are two reasons. The first one is Jochen Klepper was very creative since he was an author and a journalist. And that is why I was trying to find a creative approach, even though the story is very dramatic and serious. And I also wanted to open the inner world of Jochen Klepper to the audience. I wanted the audience to experience what he is feeling. You know, you can always see what's like in front of your eyes, but you can't really look behind a person's heart. And with this film, we tried to open this dimension of Jochen Klepper.
Yeah, there are many different instances. For example, in the first dialogue with Eichmann, he is looking at puppets with his photograph on it, reflecting sort of thoughts that the general public might have had or that he might have had before talking to Eichmann. That sort of, I think, is you wanted to picture the conscience and of Klepper at that moment, I guess.
Right. It's really interesting because Jochen Klepper used to be a soldier, and in his diaries, he is actually writing that he liked being a soldier before he understood what the war is doing to the Jewish community. He thought at first the fight for Germany is a good thing. So it's not actually just puppets in Adolf Eichmann's office, it's string puppets, and they look like Jochen Klepper himself. So it's a symbol of the National Socialists playing with the people and with the people's minds. And you said, you know, Jochen Klepper, the string puppets are commenting on what Jochen Klepper is saying. So the string puppets are kind of the earlier Jochen Klepper talking to the Jochen Klepper who's sitting there right now in this very moment.
Yeah. And of course, one of the most poignant impressions of the movie is the claustrophobic atmosphere in this small apartment where the family gathers, and where actually the walls become closer and closer and the ceiling comes down at a certain moment, which reflects also, I guess, the impossibility of an exit of the crisis they're going through.
Yeah, the life of the Jewish community was so, and of many people at this time was so limited, and yeah, so I wanted to find a way to give this feeling of being trapped also to the audience, and I found it quite interesting to play with the screen size. It's most of the time it's a square. Sometimes it changes and it opens wide. Sometimes it gets even smaller. And as you said, the ceiling comes down. Yeah.
But at the same time, you're using also some techniques to contrast it with the outside world. One very interesting transition I found between the talk with Eichmann and the small sort of apartment where the family comes together is the painting of Lesser Uri, who was, of course, sort of entartete Kunst at the time, and the Nazis actually hoarded these pictures sometimes at their homes. Mm-hmm. And so this one becomes a transition between and I think it's different pictures of Lesser Uri actually. In the beginning, it's the Siegessäule, the victory statue, and the other one is rather the rain at Unter den Linden, two pictures of Lesser Uri, which also depict sort of the physical and psychological stress of the main character, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to find a transition between these two scenes, the very glorious, light and bright office of Adolf Eichmann, and then the very dark and old apartment of the Jochen Kleppers, which is actually not quite right, because the apartment is a symbol itself, because the Klepper family, they used to live in a proper house in Berlin. But I wanted to, so the entire room is kind of a symbol of the Kleppers' lives. And Jochen Klepper, he is staying completely still at the moment when he realizes that there's no way out for the family. And so I wondered, how can I, show his way back home with him being paralyzed in the seat. So obviously the surroundings had to change and he had to be still.
Yeah, and then what follows is sort of the inner combat of all the three family members before sort of the actual act of committing suicide, and everyone having doubts here and then and having different thoughts. That also is a process where you apply means also of surrealistic character with the shadow or the devil, or I don't know what kind of figure actually it is, speaking also again the conscience of Jochen Klepper. It's a very frightening sort of horror movie scenario, even at first sight. But of course, it can be explained by the psychological sort of despair that is taking place in the minds of the three.
Mm. I wouldn't really say it's the devil, because sometimes our own thoughts are so frightening that it doesn't need anybody from outside to. I think it doesn't really need a devil in this very moment, because the shadow, that's why we called him shadow and not demon, is all the dark thoughts of Jochen Klepper in this figure who is talking to him. So all his doubts and everything he is scared of, is reflecting in this figure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And well, and it's one of the things that strikes you very much is the sort of the chamber theater effect that you have because of you have very few characters, you have very small space, not a lot of decorum, but at the same time you're portraying with the different techniques and different glimpses into the wider world, what horror is happening outside, and that it's only a question of time when this small space, which is narrowing down, will become part of this horrific external place. So I think that's a very fascinating artistic way to portray this situation. Now, the story is based actually on the biography or on a journal, a diary that Klepper wrote. That makes you think of other stories of the same period, like the Anne Frank diary or the Victor Klemperer diary. Had you been reading that before as well?
I actually haven't. No. No, it's the first diaries that I really read from the beginning to the end. Mm-hmm. I have no comparison to other persons at this time, which I think is quite good, because I sometimes, I'm also avoiding watching films that are similar to the film that I want to do, because I feel I would get some ideas from these movies for my film, and I don't want other films to reflect in this story. So that's also why I haven't read the other diaries before.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, the fact is that Klepper was in the early 1930s. He was still a recognized writer and poet. Even the Nazis recognized that he had done some good work. But in the mid 1930s, I think he got sort of what we call in German Berufsverbot. He couldn't exercise his job anymore, and had to do some other jobs. Now, the question that one asks oneself is, why did he choose to stay in Berlin at the time? After the Kristallnacht in 1938, it became very clear that Jews had no place in Germany anymore, and they had to fear the worst if they stayed. and he stayed through 1942. That's one of the things, well, the question that I have, why did he stay that long?
Yeah, that was something I was wondering as well. And I think the diaries are not very clear about it. They knew about the danger. Jochen Klepper had a second stepdaughter who has left Germany way before this story is taking place. So they knew it would make sense to leave Germany. However, it seems to me like there was always hope that this country will change and that the things that these people heard won't be true or as bad as they would think. I think there was still hope. And Jochen Klepper, the real question is not where would they go? The question for them was wherever they are, they want to stay together as a family. That's why he didn't leave, because he could have left, but he would have needed to leave his wife and stepdaughter behind, and that was no option for him. They tried to leave at this very moment, they tried to get to emigrate to another country, but yeah, it didn't work. After making this film, actually, I got a letter from a pastor from Switzerland, and he's working in a church, and back in time at the same church, there was a pastor who tried to get a visa for the Kleppers family. It never worked until a couple of days before the Kleppers took their own lives. And the letter with the visa came a couple of days too late. So if they would have waited a couple of days only, they would have had the chance to go to Switzerland.
Yeah, well, that's one of the sort of fatal irony of that time, that, as you say, or as it said in the movie, at the time in 1942, statistically between 20 and 30 Jews committed suicide in Berlin only, I think, during that time.
Jewish families.
Jewish families. So it was really a phenomenon which maybe the greater public doesn't know so much. And I think that's also one of the reasons why you chose to do this film, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're learning in school about this time and about the horrible, horrible things that had happened to people back in 1940, around this time. But even though I would count myself to the people who are very interested in the German history, I've never known about it until I read Jochen Klepper's diaries. And that was so mind-blowing that I felt that this is a story that we need to tell, that people need to hear about, because it's not only a government making the decision that people will suffer. It's not that a government is taking people and bringing them to the concentration camp. It's only by the decision to I kind of lost, but they made it possible to destroy Jewish families without deporting them to the concentration camp. Just the fear spreading around the country made people kill themselves. Yeah, so that was really interesting to me, because I feel like people, even today, in other countries, are frightened by whatever the government is making, the decisions the government is making. So yeah, I found it quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, and of course, at the time, it had been decided and bureaucratically implemented in a very minute way by Adolf Eichmann and Heydrich and others, how the different transports went for deportation into the concentration camps. And so in that situation, the Kleppers for them, the only act they could do actively, independently, and without being forced or coerced was to commit suicide. That was their only exit, to do a thing which was under their own control. I think that's what they're saying in the film. And that is, of course, very depressing, but I think it's necessary to remind us, or the young population in particular, who maybe even in their families don't have people anymore who have lived through that period, to understand what it meant at the time. Mm-hmm. We have there are less and less Holocaust survivors who are the most, I think, authentic and impressive ways to describe what happened. We have a number of concentration camp sites and museums, etc. And we have films like yours to remind us, also through the emotions and through the empathy of what happened. So that's, I think, a very important work that you're doing. Also depicting the solidarity, by the way. It's just on two occasions you can see the neighbors of the family are trying to help as much as they can to protect them, although it's just sort of pushing away a little bit of time.
Yeah. Before we made this film, I was talking to people who had lived in this time and people who had lost family members in the concentration camps, because it was quite important to me after finishing the script that they will read it and they will hear it. We actually had actors reading the script in front of a little crowd and we were discussing it, and I've made some changes to the script so that it will be as authentic as possible.
Well, let me maybe to wrap up. One of the most impressive moments of the film, I think, is just in the beginning. The sequence where you have an alleged speech of Hitler being superposed to a poet, it seems, and being read by a female voice in the beginning. That is a fascinating and puzzling scene, which I haven't grasped to interpret 100%. Maybe you can give yours.
Right, it's one poem, basically. Mm-hmm. But it can be read either way. It can be read by a victim or by Hitler in this case. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, I think, that the same words can do something good and something bad, depending on the intention who's behind the words. That's why one poet is read by these two people, and it's like fluid.
Yeah, well, of course, the Nazis often used a coded language also for very cruel things, which have been known what they meant after the Eichmann trials only. But I think what is the symbolic meaning of light and shadow, obviously, is always sort of in the eye of the beholder, who is looking at what, to see where is the darkness and where is the light. And finally, for the Klepper family, the only light was beyond the lake, where they said they would swim to another side of the lake and then meet again, sort of after death.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
so if we think about words, I feel like it kind of shows our responsibility, how we choose our words and how we talk to other people, because what we are saying in our daily lives to other people that we might even just see on the other side of the street, it can really affect them. So this entire film is also a story about the power of words.
Yeah, I think it's particularly important to remember this approaching the Holocaust Memorial Day on the 27th of January, and sort of make and get together again and join ranks and join hands against any type of anti-Semitism, hate speech in particular, which is very virulent anywhere, also in the in the online media. Yeah. So I think your film is a very important contribution in that combat. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So I think, well, thanks to producer director Benjamin Martins for joining us today and to talk about his last film, Shadow Hour, which will soon be available for viewing here in Florida during the upcoming 25th edition of the Miami Jewish Film Festival.